Matt, it's such a pleasure to once again touch base with you. Welcome again to the KK Factor. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a minute and a very strange year, hasn't it? So I've been good, hanging in there, getting through this COVID crazy. So
COVID
yeah,
crazy,
I'm
COVID normal.
COVID something. So I've been good. It's been a bit of a stop and start year for everybody, I think. So just like everybody, I've just been trying to do the best that I can under tough circumstances.
That's
So
exactly
yeah.
right. Being a clinical neuropsychologist, PhD candidate, teaching associate at Monash University, Turner Institute for Brain and Mental Health in the School of Psychological Sciences, and all the research that you're doing, which is including development of the neuropsychological tests, the assessment techniques, accurate and early detection of dementia. Actually, we won't even go to the dementia part at this stage. Just having that PhD background, has that helped you cope through this pandemic because of the insight and understanding? Or do you think it's made it worse?
Look, I think to varying. Look, I wouldn't say it's made it worse. I think I'm pretty sort of evenly tempered by nature. I do have a little predisposition towards anxiety, particularly if I'm left to my own devices and I don't have a lot to get through. So, but
Yeah.
I think this year's really taught me about taking a breath and taking a step back. And I think for me, lockdown was actually really great. I vegged out on the couch. I watched a lot of Netflix and a lot of other streaming sites. I think I purchased about 6 or 7 memberships, and then I downloaded a VPN, so I was streaming stuff from America that we can't get here. So it yeah, it was. I watched a lot of TV and actually cut off from reading any sort of academic material. I managed to do a lot within that time as well in terms of my PhD data entry, which was something that I'd been putting off for a while. Look, I think a lot of people handled this differently, and I guess we're all different in terms of the way that we cope with adverse events. And what we went through over the last year is certainly unprecedented. So
I know, that's a new
it was,
word. We've never ever, I don't believe I've ever even used that word up until 2020, unprecedented times.
mm, yeah, it's yeah. What do you say? I think as we were watching everything unravel in Wuhan late like late December last year, it was it was, well, it's not going to reach here, it's not going to reach anywhere else. These things are usually contained to certain developing countries. So I think that level of dare I say, Western arrogance, this kind of thing doesn't happen here, there's no way it'll reach us.
Yeah, we're just an
I don't think
island.
we
That's exactly right. We fail to remember that we do have incoming travelers. We fail to understand that, certain viruses do mutate, they do travel, whether it's on our clothing or on our skin or inside us, and then it goes through our sewage. Yeah, it has been a huge eye opener, I believe, to not only the broader community, but our scientists, worldwide.
Absolutely. I think, looking at the reaction to the virus from a human perspective, I think, we often don't want to believe that, things like this are happening, in this particular caliber. And it's hard for us to process and react in, a moment like this. I think that, people often shut down and they retreat, and, their ability to really understand what's happening, on that sort of larger scale, particularly, a pandemic that's highly contagious, that's, killing people with a lot of, underlying vulnerabilities, it's something that's, it's really unfathomable, and it's something that we only see in movies, and we certainly haven't experienced, as an interconnected, human race, for, several years now. I mean, going back to, what was the last one? Was it the Spanish flu, I believe?
We had the
Going
Spanish
back almost 100
flu, but
years. So,
we didn't go into lockdown. We weren't stuck in our homes. So I don't have any recollection of that. I think the biggest one would have
well, I
back
mean,
in the early 1900s,
yeah.
when they did have that swine flu. I think that was the first time in Australia where they did have a lockdown. and you know, they started losing so many lives. And
Yeah.
that's been obviously recorded if we go back to history. But
Mm,
I, like you said, you know, I don't think anyone ever thought that something like that was going to happen ever again. And yet
mm,
here we are. But you know what? We've come
mm,
through it, and I think it's been a huge learning experience for everybody. We've all learned so much from it. And as you said, you know, we can't take things for granted. And, you know, we can't look at Australia as being an island that's untouchable, because, you know, we
yeah.
might have been warned, but it did come onto our lands, and our actions showed us exactly what it can do and to what extent. Now, moving away from that and just focusing on you and all the research that you've been doing, one would have thought that you would have been so busy through this pandemic, this lockdown, because you're so involved and passionate when it comes to dementia and Alzheimer's. We've spoken about that in previously live on radio. But now
Mm,
more specifically, you have mentioned that you have been working on a detection of dementia in the elderly,
mm,
and finding new tests. And it's
yeah.
ironic actually, because we've got all the scientists in the world now running different tests for this pandemic, and yet, you know, when we're talking about the vulnerable and people in aged care and people that are still at home that have dementia,
Mm.
it's just so unique with you, the passion that you have. What I want to ask you before we go into the research and what you have found and the testing moving forward, I just want to ask you, Matt, your passion for the elderly, where does that stem from?
Look, I think I sort of fell into the field of, neuroscience more broadly speaking. I was kind of drawn to the brain, and I was quite interested. It was so, I mean, it's such an intricate piece of it's a, I think the way that I can only refer to it is it's biology's crown jewel, and it does so much, and we know a lot, but we still know not a lot about what the brain can actually do. We've been able to map bits and pieces of it. Work out what certain things do when we look at models of impairment. And there's still a lot that we don't know. And I think going through my clinical training, one of the things that I really came to realize was that the tests that we give, aren't necessarily appropriate across a range of different cultures. And it really is embedded in terms of the way that different societies function, what their values are, looking at language structure, how that maps onto the brain. And then I sort of got to start to thinking about the elderly Greek generation here in Australia, and how they didn't necessarily have the opportunity of a stable education,
Yeah.
particularly going through a number of wars, a civil war, and then subsequent instability. So education was quite chopping and changing back then. So one of my questions that I sort of wanted to ask was are the tests that we're using appropriate for use within the Asian Greek community, and more broadly speaking, other, culturally and linguistically diverse communities? And, in short, the answer is no, for quite a few reasons. I think one of them being the content that we use isn't necessarily reflective of, things that they understand. For instance, something that we use in Alzheimer's is a, confrontational naming test. So we show them a bunch of pictures. Now, some of these things are quite specific to regions. So, people might be failing this test, not because they have an impairment per se, but
But
because
at
they don't
education level.
and education level, and exposure to specific concepts, or pictures that are, I suppose, quite regional in terms of what you're actually seeing. So, so somebody from, let's say, an Eskimo, might not necessarily know what an abacus is. And I don't think a lot of younger kids would know what an abacus is, and the only reason I know what an abacus is because I used one in primary school, the accounting thing. But,
Yeah.
these are all very, culturally loaded, and culturally specific, items that we use in some of the tests, and some of the concepts and the style of thinking that's required to move through them isn't necessarily reflected in a level of education that elderly Greeks were exposed to back in the 40s and the 50s, and arguably today as well.
So
Styles of
how
education.
do you break through that barrier? Because as you're saying, it's not one culture. It is
Yeah,
a vast range of diverse cultures. And as you
yeah,
said, different cultures, different values, different beliefs. How do
yeah.
you break through and create a test or do you need to create multiple tests that can accommodate the diverse communities around us?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question. I think in terms of creating a universal test, it certainly is possible. It's about going back to the drawing board and working out, what tests are going to work, what tests are, less, I suppose, culture loaded. So taking out, some of the elements like language is something that's quite difficult to get
Yeah,
around.
language is huge. I mean, you've got how many languages that you need to, break into?
Yeah, like a massive amount of languages, and sometimes concepts. And I think we really saw this in the pandemic too, where things are being translated from English to a target language, and they
Yeah,
just
like
didn't work.
I'm going to interrupt you here, really interrupt you, and I do apologize, Matt. Going on to the translation, I mean, the federal government did turn around and say initially they were using Google Translate. Now, you and I both being Greek, if my Greek is not 100%, so if I'm trying to ask a question or write a question to somebody and I want it translated correctly, I know how to say it, but when I actually go to translate it and then Google writes and I reread it back, it's not actually the question I'm asking, or it's completely out of content. So that would mislead, let alone confuse somebody. So, so that was that barrier that they had to get through, and that caused enormous problems, but you can't turn the clock back.
No, you can't. And I think, this is a very, pardon me, it's a very important thing to consider, because when we are developing new tests, I think we've kind of all, in the past, people have tended to try and reduce culture to fit a model of cognition, whereas they should be doing it the other way around. They should be accommodating, cognition to fit into a model of culture, because simply translating something, it just doesn't work a lot of the time. It's literal, it's concrete. There isn't an understanding of, nuances that, are embedded within specific types of languages. And, it's an ongoing challenge. And I think, in terms of workarounds, people might translate test content here in Australia from an existing, Anglo or an American test, and try to apply it to, a range of other speaking, a range of non-English speaking groups. And what you find is that it's not a reliable method of assessment, for so many reasons. They might be failing because the grammatical and the syntax that drives that particular language that's been translated isn't necessarily, capturing the nuances and the specifics of that particular language. So, they might not be understanding things in their own language that's been translated because it hasn't been
Yes, and
done.
plus you need to keep it simple. You can use all the medical terminology and talk about different parts of the body and different parts of the brain and all that. And then you've got that education level barrier as well. So trying to then to simplify it for them to have just a nice, easy understanding, again, is another barrier that you've got to break through.
Absolutely. So, I think at the end of the day, this, one kind of model doesn't really fit all. And, this is something that my research has been exploring over the past 4 years now. So, which has led to the development of an IQ test. So we've just confirmed that statistically, which is fantastic. So we're in the process of crunching some more numbers and several memory tests that are culturally specific to the Greek community here, and I think another 5 or 6 that look at what we refer to as executive functions. So higher order sort of cognitive skills, stuff like error monitoring, cognitive flexibility. So we got there in the end, which is really great. In terms of being able to prove this this template and this model works, and I have no doubt it's going to make a very positive impact on the Greek community and the wider neuropsychological community here in Australia and across the globe, more sort of broadly speaking.
So Matt, the early detection, so this test will give us an early detection of the onset of Alzheimer's, is that correct?
It'll give us an accurate detection. So
does that mean with an accurate detection, we have things, because you hear so much and you read so much of late of people finding things that slow it down or stop it at its tracks. Obviously there's no cure, but will early detection mean we can stop it or put it into remission so it doesn't progress?
No, that's not the case at all. Unfortunately, these are what we refer to as degenerative brain conditions. So once the process starts, there's nothing we can do to stop, the brain from breaking down.
We can't slow the process?
Well, we can in the early stages using neuroinhibitor called Aricept. So it helps slow down the process and helps with, essentially parts of the brain, communicating a little bit more efficiently, but unfortunately not. We can't stop the process. There is no cure. But what we're talking about in terms of early and accurate detection is that, we can offer people, time and strategies, and, I think more so time to get their affairs in order. If we can give them 2 to 3 more years of, a better quality of life, and, the opportunity to, take that final holiday to Greece, or, do things that they wanted to, that they I suppose didn't necessarily have the opportunity to.
This is at the
So
early stages, is that right?
early stages, yeah.
Okay, now the test is for elderly, was predominantly, that's what we're talking about. But
Yeah.
I remember many, many years ago, publicly it was known, Hazel Hawke, for an example, she had Alzheimer's early in life. I'm pretty sure she was in her early 60s when she got Alzheimer's, and that's, that's not very common. Normally you're expecting it later in life. So what are the key elements or the key symptoms that one may have where it's like, we're talking now about COVID, and it's like, even if you've got the mildest of symptoms, go and get tested. So when we're talking about Alzheimer's, we can't necessarily say it's just in the elderly. And what would be one of your, even the mildest of symptoms where you should go and get tested, and hopefully it's not an onset of Alzheimer's?
So generally what you tend to see is, forgetfulness is something that, is one of the key sort of indicators of, of Alzheimer's in particular. So, you might forget where you've placed your keys or where you've parked your car. So these are some of the earliest signs. And again, look, as people head into their 60s, they might experience, conditions that do impair your cognitive function, but are reversible. Stuff like urinary tract infection or a vitamin deficiency. So these things can, disrupt cognitive function, but they are reversible. Depression and anxiety also have an impact on
exactly. I was just about to actually say that, because I had my own personal experience. I'm pretty sure it was about 6-7 years ago, when all of a sudden I started forgetting things, or it was like, oh, I just don't remember what I did 15 minutes ago. And I let it progress for a few weeks, and it was at the point that I actually then did go to see my doctor, and I said, am I getting Alzheimer's? Although, at that point I wasn't even in my 50s yet, but I have heard of younger people. And he did actually say to me, he says, no, what it is, it's severe stress. Obviously we talked about certain things, he asked me certain things, and he did explain to me that severe stress can place so much pressure on your brain that you can start to forget things, to that point where I actually was worried that, am I having, early detection of Alzheimer's?
Yeah, look, I think, when you're particularly stressed or depressed, you're really not firing on all cylinders. And, I think I've been, guilty of taking too much on. And, what we do is we don't pay attention. If we don't pay attention, we're not going to be able to take information in efficiently and then commit it to memory for later. So this is where, people tend to be a little bit more forgetful, but if we're using external strategies like, diaries or our smartphones to prompt us to remember, so these are some of the, some of the things that I certainly recommend in terms of tools to try and help people that might be a bit stressed, or, even going through, the beginning stages of, Alzheimer's, where what we would refer to as a mild sort of cognitive impairment. So where you might not be able to take in a lot of information, but some of it still might be getting in. But, like I said, there are, a range of conditions that can potentially affect, why people are displaying, what we refer to as, a possible memory impairment. And, this is why we needed these tests within the aging Greek community here, because, like I said, or like we discussed a few moments earlier, they have a low level of education. Not all of them, but a majority, I would say, certainly do. So, these tests are scaled according to level of education. So, the higher level of education that you have, the better you're going to do on an IQ test. That's been proven time and time again. So when we're using a cutoff score, so say one of the tests is out of 30, somebody with an average level of education, say 12 years, they might get 25 out of 30. But somebody with an education of 6 years, like a lot of these elderly Greeks do, they might get 10. And that's still normal compared to them, compared to their own, demographic background, the 6 years of education, the style of education
A
and so forth.
combination. And now,
Yeah,
these
yeah.
elderly
So,
Greeks, are they already predominantly in an aged care system, or are they still at home, or they're just going by their normal days, are living alone, and someone has detected that they're starting to forget things and they go to the doctors? Or is this part of testing that they're already gone into a nursing home?
So I assessed 90 healthy people just to get an idea of what, like a benchmark sort of normal performance looks like within, aging Greeks from 70 to 85, just to get an idea about, what that sort of looks like in terms of a normal, healthy aging Greek with low levels of education. And then we compared them to a sample of Greeks that have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And you can see the massive discrepancy there in terms of their performances. So on the memory tests in particular, on language tests as well. So we're seeing that people with Alzheimer's are, performing quite poorly on, tests that have been, time and time again noted to, show sensitivity to this particular type of disease.
Wow. I've got to hand you, you're just an amazing human being. I do recall the first time I
I know
met
about
you
that.
when you rode your bike to Sydney raising funds for Alzheimer's dementia. That was like so many years ago, Matt. And, and I'm really honoured that I've continued following your journey and maintaining this relationship with you, and then, seeing, all the research where you're progressing. So well done to you for that. Fredilia Care had awarded you with the Anna Matthews OAM Scholarship in your advance in research into dementia. For the elderly, we given $10,000 scholarship that helped you create and adapt a range of tests. Where else do you get your funding? Are you able to get funding from any government bodies, or you just got to be doing charities? How does it all work for you?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of the money for this research was privately sourced through the Greek community here in Melbourne. So I had quite a bit of support from a range of people. So Marathon Foods donated a substantial amount. My lovely cousin as well, who she donated quite a bit as well, and the Australian Hellenic Golf Association. So the boys, Theo, George, they all, so they hold an annual golfing event, and they tend to drum up quite a bit of money there. So they were kind enough to donate.
Huge shout out to all of them, to every single one of them that are behind you. Well done, Matt. Is there
Yeah, look, and
anyone
it's
else you want
also,
to shout out to?
yeah, absolutely. Like people like, Maria Vumbik, who has been, instrumental and, really by my side, for the past, 5 years now. So she's been great. Bill Papastudiadis as well. Over at the
Yes,
Greek
our
Institute.
president of the Greek community of Melbourne,
Yeah.
Victoria.
So I've been nagging them for the past 5 years. And I think, once we get together next year and we have a drink to, thank everybody, they'll really see the benefit, and, they'll go, okay, well, this is what he was, waffling on about for the past 5 years, and it was relentlessly pursuing us about. And then also I've had quite a lot of external political support as well. So Arthur Sinodinos, the Greek, or the Australian ambassador rather, to the United States. So Arthur's just been, fantastic. Always made time for me. The former Greek ambassador as well to Australia. So Ambassador Zegogari. So she was fantastic. And our recently departing Consul General, Dimitris Mikolopoulos. So, again, I've had quite a lot of support from
That's
quite a lot
amazing.
of people. So it's been an absolute joy to, not just, I suppose, advise them on what's been happening, but, to work side by side, a lot of, quite a lot of astounding people, and, accomplished people, and to, learn from them, and, think about what my next steps are going to be.
And what are your next steps going to be? What will we see from you in 2021 and moving forward, Matt?
I don't know. I'm thinking.
Do you have a roadmap yet?
No,
That's another new word for us.
I don't. But I'm thinking. This part of my life. It's really. I think it's going to be a bit of my legacy. My gift to the Greek community, to the Asian Greek community, anyway. But I'm thinking about doing something different. Stepping out of the clinical field, and trying something different. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm I'm excited, and I think the right thing will find me when I'm ready for it.
That's exactly right. Matt, it has been a pleasure speaking to you. Please stay in touch. If I can give you all the media support, all the extra media support, I'm more than happy, more than happy to do so, whatever I can assist in that way. Congratulations with everything, and well done to all the research. You have made the Greek community of Melbourne and the broader community very, very proud.
Thank
And
you.
I'm pretty sure you're very much admired by many people that have lost loved ones to Alzheimer's and dementia. And
Mm.
I'm sure that all those people are behind you, with your testing, with anything that you can do to help, so that in all the years to come, things do become easier, and, there's better tests, and, hopefully something comes out of it that they can actually stop it at its tracks. I mean, who knows what the future holds, hey?
Yeah, fingers crossed. Look, I think, at the end of the day, people like us wouldn't have the opportunities that we do if it wasn't for that, for that brave generation, leaving their homes, coming here, not having any, language skills, not really knowing where they were going on the other side of the world. So, I think it's really our duty to, make sure that the elderly generation are taken care of.
And look, I still believe we are the lucky country. They all came here for a reason.
Yeah.
And people like you make it even extra special for them.
Oh, thank you. That's really nice of you to say.
Thanks, Matt.